As I film this video, it's actually a very dark and stormy night, which feels extra appropriate because this game is terrifying. But let's talk about that. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and this is my brutally honest review for Alan Wake 2. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. So it has been 13 years since the original Alan Wake came out, and this game, as good as it is, as beloved as it is, it's also a game that left a lot of very big questions hanging about. The original game had us playing as this very cool author who wrote these crime thrillers, but he's also a guy that, frankly, kind of was a jerk. So suddenly, at the end of the game, when he vanished, when he doesn't win, when he doesn't escape the dark place, it left a lot of fans like myself incredibly confused. And now, for this last decade, we've been wondering, when are we going back? When will we see how this story actually ends? Alan Wake 2 is completely different from the original. It has two protagonists. It's actually got completely new locations. It's got obviously much better graphics, but most importantly, it's a completely different genre. This is straight up survival horror. And I'll go a step further than that. This is one of the most terrifying games I have ever played. I have legitimately dropped the controller. It scared me so bad. But let's break this down into three separate chunks. Let's talk about the gameplay, the story itself without spoiling anything, and finally, some technical problems I do have with this game when it comes to just the general flow of it. Now, first and foremost, the gameplay of this is very separate. A couple hours into the game itself, you unlock the ability to just swap between either Alan Wake or Saga Anderson whenever you want, and they exist in literally different dimensions. Alan Wake is still in the dark place, which means that when you're playing as him, it is very much about trying to fight literal shadows, chasing alleyways that make no sense, about trying to track down nightmares, sometimes literally, and it's a very spooky business. Whereas when you're playing as Saga Anderson, she exists in the real world. She's tracking a cult called the Cult of the Tree that's committing a bunch of very heinous murders and somehow turning people into monsters. So both of these characters, while they are very much in different planes of reality, they are able to interact. So while you're playing this, you get a chance to, if you want, completely play Saga's storyline first, or play all the way through Alan Wake's, and then switch whenever the hankering gets you. Now, personally, I thought this was a really good idea, but I must admit, I was completely blown away by just how good both of these characters play. The shift to straight up survival horror, this feels like the Resident Evil 2 remake. This has the quick select style of inventory where you basically put stuff on a little hex and you can easily just switch between healing items, shotguns, crossbows. It's really easy to constantly stay on your toes and active because there is some pretty tough combat. The enemies in this game are called the Taken. They're people that are filled with the power of the darkness. Now, what that means a lot of times is that they're incredibly quick and they are completely impervious to bullets. The only way to hurt the Taken is to push their darkness off. By aiming your flashlight and focusing the beam, you make them susceptible to actual damage. But what's extra cool about this when it comes to playing as Saga or as Alan Wake is that there's different styles of enemy and they have different weaknesses. Like if you're fighting against a Taken that happens to be a wolf, you're not going to fight it in the same way that you'd fight some sort of big, gigantic tyrant style enemy. It's cool that you have to think about each enemy carefully or they're going to kill you. Damage is surprisingly high. If these Taken actually get a good hit on you, it can take off a lot of your health. Now, the light keeps you safe. There is some pretty frequent checkpoints as you're exploring the jungles or going through these weird, nightmarish copycat streets of New York City. You are going to find some good spots to save and catch your breath. But instead of creating a sense of security, it really just heightens the fear because The best aspect of Alan Wake 2 is, quite frankly, the incredibly good story of it. Trying to track down this cult and investigating the depths of the dark place, a lot of the explanations as to what's going on are freaking perfect. The story and writing in this are truly the best that Remedy has ever done. I mean, these people have made games like Max Payne and Control and Quantum Break, and what's crazy is that this game legitimately combines all of them into one perfect meta ball of terror. It's cool that this game really gives you a lot of freedom in it as well. A lot of areas start you off in a hub where you get a chance to pick up a map, and then after that, they set you free. There is a specific place you're supposed to go to progress the story, but you can choose to wander off and find random puzzle boxes that the cultists have left with each other to try and crack codes and get extra item pack inventory spaces, or more healing, or extra shotguns. Or sometimes it's cool to play as Alan Wake because Alan Wake has the ability to flip this angel lamp and actually alter reality. He can change an environment back and forth, and it's cool sometimes to flip it on and find an extra puzzle, an extra path, an extra giant weapon that's going to help in the future. But this also brings me to the other major gameplay difference from Alan Wake to Saga. You see, Saga, she works for the FBI. She's here to get answers. She's here to ask hard questions. She's here to try and crack some clues. So a lot of her gameplay is trying to actually suss things out. Playing as her goes beyond just trying to pick up some random riddles or put them in your notebook. It actually feels much more beautifully creepy. Times when you're questioning a suspect that seems to psychically know more than they actually should, or going through the woods and seeing glowing footprints of somebody that's supposed to be dead and has somehow managed to get up and walk off, literally tracing their nightmare footprints into the woods, or times where you're just trying to find out which of these bloody dial prints actually is the safe code. Playing as Saga is incredibly scary, and that brings me, though, to the one part of her gameplay that I didn't completely love, which is the case board. Now, for the most part, I think this is a pretty cool idea. So she's able to go into this little mind palace. She makes a facsimile office. You can go here whenever you want. Pressing the start button brings you into it. And then when you're here, you're putting up different clues, the things you figured out, the next questions you need to ask, or criminal profiles to try and figure out and get into the head of somebody that you're trying to verbally joust with. Now, I think this is cool. My problem is that about 10% of the time, it's not optional. Most puzzles you can completely solve on your own. You can figure them out at your own pace, but occasionally it will just straight up say on the screen, it's time to look at your case files. And to me, that is kind of immersion breaking. I actually really appreciate when this game just kind of takes the hands off the wheel and lets me explore. And I do go to the case room quite a bit. It's not like I hate being there, but it's weird that I like when I get a chance to go there when I want and explore when I want, instead of having this external force that says, hey, it's time to push the story forward on the board. Really, being Saga, though, is just so really cool. It's so fresh. It's so different. And surprisingly, I have to say, it does drastically improve the overall Alan Wake experience to have a great detective also trying to comb through this mystery as he explores the darkness. Now, Alan Wake has his own ability, but it's the power of a writer. Now, the dark place is a pocket dimension. It's not heaven. It's not hell. Time doesn't exist there. Alan Wake doesn't need to take big squirty dumps. It's just a pocket dimension that he's stuck in and has been stuck in for the last 13 years. So when you're there, you'll see graffiti on the walls of his subconscious telling him not to write any more books, or times when you're trying to go around and find different little shreds of manuscript that point towards extra storylines that you've already scrapped. But his power specifically is that he can straight up rewrite reality. you'll be in a caved-in tunnel, and you can make it so that it's an open path. If you're stuck, maybe you can make the current locked room unlocked because you've moved it to a different room. It's crazy to see in action, but it's also kind of beautiful. There is this dark logic to Alan Wake 2 that functions on so many different levels, from the combat to the gore to just blasting people to solving that next puzzle that's optional and out of the way. It all fits together in 1,000 tiny ways. But that brings me to the story. The actual plot of Alan Wake 2 is so complex, I actually think most people won't get it. This is not me saying that people are stupid. There is so much going on from a meta-contextual thing. Like, the writer of the game is in the game itself as Alex Casey, the person that Alan Wake has written into existence. Previous heroes from other Remedy games, like freaking Tim Breaker. This is actually the previous protagonist of their game Quantum Break. He's just here. They reference the Federal Bureau of Control. They have combined everything they have ever made is all together in this, but in 1,000 tiny layers. Even the baseline story, though, is the perfect payoff. I love Alan Wake. I love the original game so much, but let's face it, that was a thriller. It was a game that was cool, it was exciting, it was certainly enticing, but it asked questions that didn't really get any answers. The answers we get are truly staggeringly fantastic. Answers about reality, about where he's been, about Mr. Scratch. What's truly insane about Alan Wake 2 is that it never feels pretentious. It'll do crazy commercials on TV with live action actors punching papier-mâché bears and then straight up jump you into a detailed interrogation scene where you're peeling out some very difficult to understand information and then whiplash, throw you into the next big shootout. All of it is plot relevant. All of it fits. All of it is good. This is just so fulfilling. The game manages to land so many intricate interactions to make this very big story that takes place in multiple realities with multiple antagonists and multiple big boss fights all come together in exactly the right way. But that's also a thing I didn't like, specifically, is talking about the bosses, is that I think this game, it almost feels like it's trying to be a TV show at times. In fact, you have a lot of episodes where you're straight up on a TV show called In Between with Mr. Door. And as much as I like these segments, they all come together, it does feel like you spend a lot of time watching stuff, and then that's all right. But then to just go straight from that to like a clunky boss fight that doesn't really feel well paced, sometimes this game feels like it just doesn't know how much to trust you and set you free. It's just the issue that not a single one of the boss fights, even if they were tough or killed me a couple times, they never felt exciting because it's kind of just a, hey, whoop-de-doo, here's a exclamation point for the end of the chapter. I will say, I like the fact that this game has so many differences between Saga and Alan Wake. Not just the way they interact with the world, but even their weapons and stuff. They don't get a one-to-one accuracy. While they are both able to play the same, they have the same style of inventory, I like the fact that, honestly, they fight different enemies, and they have different upgrades. So, when you're exploring in the world of reality, Saga Anderson is able to find manuscript pages. They're like scraps of paper that she uses as currency to upgrade her skills. She can make it so that she's able to just load her guns faster or have more clip size. Pretty standard upgrades. Whereas Alan Wake, I like his upgrade system more because, honestly, it's a lot easier. If you find a word of power, which are like these big spirals, you stare at it and you get an upgrade point. And you can put that into one of these different trees of word of gun, word of power, word of action. That makes it where you have better defense, more action, or special stuff like the last bullet in your clip does more damage. Both of them are great, but I think I'm still just most impressed that everything comes together. This game could have been a big ol' sloppy mess. There's so many references, there's so many jokes, there's just so much crazy stuff. Even the freaking person who did the music for this game, Poe, she is the twin brother of this guy, Danielewski. He wrote this book called House of Leaves, which is basically just Alan Wake. I mean, I could make a 4-hour video. I could literally make a 4-hour video of all the craziness on this game, but let's just say it's worth it. If you liked the original Alan Wake, it's just that, but 50 times better. But now we have to do the tough thing. We have to try and put a number on a sequel I have been waiting 13 years to play. This has been a long time coming, but let's go to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Alan Wake 2 a 9.5 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big old thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. And please keep dreaming. And don't pay attention to Mr. Scratch back there. He's just having a bad day. Aren't we all? Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.